It's one of America's most loved national parks, but underneath the beauty lies a killer, one that gets discovered from space.
In 1965, NASA begins a mission to map the surface of the Earth from space. They plan to use state-of-the-art cameras mounted on satellites, but to make sure the images they are getting are accurate, NASA decides to make a control set of pictures on the ground at Yellowstone.
They're making this map of Yellowstone so that they have a baseline, and the person in charge, his name is Bob Christensen.
Yellowstone has the ideal geology to do this because the park is just chock full of geysers and these natural pools, all of which can test the real accuracy of these cameras.
Because Christensen is also a geologist, the National Park Service also has him collect rock samples that are later carbon dated.
These rock samples reveal something strange.
It turns out that most of the rock in Yellowstone is made up of something called rhyolite, which only occurs when you have lava flowing or volcanic explosions. But there are no active volcanoes in Yellowstone.
Still, Christensen's data doesn't lie. The bulk of the park's geology is the result of several massive eruptions over the last 2 million years.
There are hundreds of unique geological features across the park. So Christensen's first thought is that these were the product of an ancient volcano chain that has long since gone dormant.
But when NASA's satellite mapping of the park is finally finished in 1972, Christensen is shocked by what the infrared pictures reveal.
What the images tell him is that the unique geological features of Yellowstone were not, as he thought, formed by an ancient chain of volcanoes, but by a single supervolcano.
Of the over 1,000 volcanoes we know of on Earth, only about 20 are supervolcanoes. And this is one of the biggest ever found.
The biggest of these eruptions took place 2 million years ago. This eruption launched as much as 600 cubic miles of red-hot lava and rocks into the air. This is an explosion 2,500 times bigger than the Mount St. Helens eruption.
Then, Christensen makes an even more startling discovery.
Even though it has been dormant for 500,000 years, lava still flows in this massive supervolcano underneath Yellowstone National Park.
And in 2022, scientists uncover even more alarming news.
A study published in the journal Science shows that lava chambers under the park are rapidly filling.
This, combined with the fact that Yellowstone has over 3,000 earthquakes a year, leads some to speculate that the supervolcano may be preparing to erupt once again.
If the next eruption is anything like the last one, it would spew enough debris into the sky to block out the sun in the western United States for decades, leading to widespread famine and economic collapse.
Considering the Yellowstone supervolcano has remained dormant for over 500,000 years, let us hope for another 500,000 at least.
You know the saying, curiosity killed a cat. Well, one curious diver completely ignores the warning when he comes across a strange underwater hole.
It's 1985, and a man named Henri Cosquer is exploring the waters of Cape Monjou south of Marseille. Around 100 feet down, he sees a hole in a cliffside just big enough for him to swim into.
He swims into the hole, and he sees that it curves upwards into the darkness. And he realizes that the hole is the entrance to an underground tunnel that's over 200 feet long.
The farther he swims, the narrower the passage gets. It's also full of stalagmites, so one wrong move and he could end up trapped. And so he has to abandon his exploration.
Over the next few years, Kosker keeps the tunnel a secret. But eventually, he realizes if he's going to explore deeper, there's safety in numbers.
In 1991, he returns with a few fellow divers. Kosker leads them through the tunnel until they end up in a large cave. And that is when he notices a painting on the wall. And then another, and another, and the walls are covered in them.
Many of the images appear to be animals, including horses, penguins, and even a jellyfish.
Then Kosker finds something truly astonishing.
He spots a handprint. Looks like it's been stenciled into the cave wall. Only one of the fingers is missing.
As they look closer, they begin to see loads of these mutilated hand images on the walls of the cave. So they take a bunch of photos and head for the surface.
But before Kosker can share his discovery, 4 other divers find the cave.
These divers are totally under-equipped for such a dangerous dive. They have no spare tanks, no extra regulator, and no safety line. And they quickly run into trouble.
Their flippers begin to stir up some silt, which completely obscures their vision. They can't see each other, and they lose all sense of direction.
Tragically, 3 of the divers drown. So a spooked Kosker hands over his photos of the cave to French authorities.
And they send a team of their Navy divers to now go and explore this cave. They begin to catalog the paintings on the wall, and they count a total of over 500 different cave paintings.
Carbon dating reveals that the oldest of the images dates back 27,000 years, and that people returned to the cave over and over again, adding to this art for over 14,000 years.
But it's the images of hands that get the most attention.
Scientists' first thought is that the hands were mutilated. But after the discovery of similar hand stencils in caves nearby, they postulate that it might be a type of visual code communication or some kind of very ornate picture language.
It turns out to be the oldest known example of written language ever found, by over 20,000 years.
Incredibly, researchers believe that the cave once held 4 or 5 times as many images as it does today. That is before rising sea levels washed them all away. Sadly, it's estimated that the imagery that still remains may be washed away within 14 years.
Now, a team of artists and scientists are working to recreate all of this art in a museum in Marseille in an attempt to preserve these amazing unearthed mysteries before they are lost forever.
Back in 1938, a fishing boat captain in South Africa invites a friend to check out his catch. What she finds ends up shocking scientists everywhere.
It's just before Christmas in 1938 in East London, South Africa, and a woman named Marjorie Courtney Latimer is the curator of a small natural history museum. She is with a friend of hers that is a commercial fisherman, and she often will go through his hall to find cool and unique animal specimens to display in her museum.
She sticks her hands in these layers of these slimy sea creatures, and she starts to dig around when something catches her eye. It's this 5-foot-long, bright blue fish with these 4 fins that kind of look like arms.
The fisherman with 30 years of professional fishing experience cannot identify this fish.
Marjorie is also baffled, but determined to figure out what type of species this unusual creature is.
She wants to show this specimen to a fish expert that she knows. However, he's gone for the holiday and won't return for weeks.
Exposure to the sun is already starting to change the color of the fish from blue to gray, and she's becoming really eager to preserve it. So she calls a local taxidermist. This is the only way to save it.
8 weeks later, the fish expert returns and is shocked by what he sees.
That fish actually turns out to be a known species. It's called a coelacanth. And it was thought that this particular species had died out around 65 million years ago, right alongside the dinosaurs.
While this coelacanth is the first found, it's far from the last. Over the next several decades, experts uncover and study more than 300 in the wild, and they learn something remarkable.
Scientists eventually realized that they had a unique way of locomoting in the ocean. Instead of swimming with primarily tail motion, as most bony fish do today, the coelacanth swims using some paddling of its front and back legs, almost as though it's sort of wading or walking through the water.
Some scientists speculate that coelacanth is the ancestor to the first vertebrates to crawl out of the water, thus the ancestors of modern land animals.
And actually, coelacanths are genetically linked with all other tetrapods. So anything in the horse family, anything in the feline family, and yes, even us.
To this day, Marjorie Courtney Latimer's discovery is known as the zoological find of the century.
And what's even more amazing is that had it not been for Marjorie's determination to preserve and to save this fish, it is possible that it could have ended up on somebody's table for Christmas dinner in 1938.
Rediscovering an ancient species is truly incredible. But what if you found a sea monster that's not supposed to exist and is actually real?
As dawn breaks on a small Danish village, down the beach, the crowd has gathered around something that has been washed up overnight. A strange creature lies dead on the sand.
It's massive. It has sort of an amorphous blob of a body, 2 giant cloudy eyes, a bony beak that resembles that of a bird, and it has 10 long arms with openings that resemble mouths with hooked, sharp teeth.
To the villagers, this looks like a sea monster. And to some, it looks like a specific monster, the mythical kraken.
According to legend, the kraken is an enormous multi-armed beast that has terrorized the ocean for centuries. It was infamous for smashing boats to pieces and dragging sailors to a watery grave.
Kraken or not, the villagers know that this massive carcass is stinking up the beach. A few fishermen cut off some pieces to use as bait, and they bury the rest.
But someone in the village takes a souvenir, its beak.
3 years later, the beak is gifted to a Norwegian scientist, Japetus Steenstrup. He is fully aware of the stories about the bloodthirsty kraken.
So when Steenstrup gets his hands on what may be a piece of an actual kraken, he realizes he may have the holy grail of maritime mysteries in his hands.
He immediately notices the similarity between the beak he's received and the beak of another animal, a squid. Squids use their beaks to pulverize their prey before they eat them.
The description of the sea monster from the beach also reminds Steenstrup of squids. Both have unusually large eyes and 10 limbs in total.
And in certain species, the suckers have small tooth-like hooks inside of them to create a better grip.
Steenstrup declares to the world that he's discovered a new genus of squid, Argyteuthis, the giant squid. This takes the myth of the kraken and it moves it into the reality of science.
But does one beak and a secondhand story really prove the existence of a giant killer squid? debate in the scientific community continues until 1873.
In Portugal Bay, Newfoundland, 2 men and a boy are out on a fishing boat when they spy something floating in the water, this sort of large, unidentifiable mass. So they use a pole with a hook on it to pull the object closer.
As the point of the hook pierces the creature, it roars to life, charges the boat, and slings a massive tentacle over the side.
The young member of the fishing crew grabs their tackle axe and cuts off part of the tentacle, after which the creature pulls back into the sea.
The men then bring this 19-foot-long tentacle back to the mainland, and they give it to a local reverend who has an interest in biology.
Then, 1 month later, another local fishing boat finds an entire giant squid tangled in its nets. The reverend buys the squid for $10 and documents the discovery in a photograph.
This is the first ever complete specimen of the giant squid recovered from nature. It's evidence that the mythical kraken may indeed be real.
And it makes you wonder, what other mythical creatures actually exist in the depths of the briny deep?
Pavel Efimov is trudging along the banks of an icy river in Yakutia, Siberia, scouring for mammoth ivory. He's waited until midsummer to begin his search because it's a little bit easier to dig into the ground.
It's hard work in a harsh environment, but it's got its rewards. A single tusk can fetch up to $20,000, so just a couple can have Efimov set up for years.
On this day, he's not having any luck. So he decides, okay, I'm gonna abort and go home. But as he decides to leave, he sees what looks like a clump of fur sticking up out of the ice.
Efimov races over and starts digging. It's definitely not a tusk. It seems to be some sort of animal jaw, but its teeth are much smaller than a mammoth's.
He chips away at the ice and he discovers it's a giant severed head.
At first, it looks like a dog, but upon closer inspection, he realizes that it's a wolf's head. This head is incredibly well preserved, and it is gigantic.
The find reminds Efimov of a fearsome beast that went extinct 10,000 years ago. The direwolf.
At 6 feet long and 175 pounds, the direwolf was approximately the size of a man, but much more powerful. Its bite alone was strong enough to take down prey many times its size, like mastodons and bison.
So Efimov takes the head home with him, and he gets in contact with the Republic of Sakha Academy of Sciences.
Efimov hands over the head to a biologist, who's stunned by what he sees.
When he measures the skull, it's 16 inches long, much bigger than any modern wolf head.
The fur is so well preserved that the scientist thinks that there is no way this thing is 10,000 years old. And so they send some samples away for carbon dating. It turns out he was right. It's not 10,000 years old. It's 40,000 years old.
While the time period still lines up with when direwolves roamed the Earth, none have ever been found in this area.
After a lot of testing, it turns out that this isn't the head of a direwolf, but it's a similar species of Pleistocene wolf that preyed on large animals.
It's the first remains found of a well-preserved, fully grown wolf from the Pleistocene era. And this ancient find shows us that this wolf was much bigger and much deadlier than previously thought.
Some mysteries from the skies go far beyond anything we expect.
It's 2014 in Cincinnati, and a widow named Carol Knight is going through her late husband's belongings in his office. Much of what she's finding is exactly what you would expect. Some papers, an old, well-worn pair of sneakers, that kind of thing.
And as she's looking in the back of the closet, she comes upon this white bag. She lifts it up, and she can hear it make a loud clank.
She opens it, and inside, it's loaded with this technical equipment. There are these metal coils that run to these odd-looking sensors. There's like straps and tools and a small 1960s film camera. Usually stuff like this might just get tossed in the trash or maybe donated to Goodwill or something.
But these aren't just random items. They belong to Carol's late husband, legendary astronaut Neil Armstrong.
Obviously, in the astronaut hierarchy, Neil Armstrong sits at the very top. He's the first person to set foot on the moon. And in July 1969, 650 million people huddled around their television sets to watch that moment happen.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Obviously, any artifact associated with him or the Apollo 11 mission is going to be extremely valuable.
After he dies in 2012, Carroll gives curators from the National Air and Space Museum access to his office. They come in and they collect anything that they think might be important for the museum.
2 years later, when Carol finds this bag in the closet, she doesn't know what to make of it. So before throwing it all away, Carol calls the museum again and sends curator Alan Needell a photograph of the contents of the bag.
When Alan sees the photos, he can't believe his eyes.
This looks like stuff from the Apollo 11 mission. And this means that these items have been to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Everybody knows the Westinghouse TV camera that took this famous shot.
But there was a second camera, a 16 millimeter, mounted on top of the lunar module.
Armstrong and Aldrin used this camera to film themselves while they're tearing around the moon, taking samples of moon dust and moon rocks, and planting the American flag.
So how did this priceless piece of history end up buried in a closet for more than 40 years?
It seems that nobody but Armstrong knew that this camera was in the closet because it wasn't supposed to even come back to Earth in the first place.
When it comes to space travel, there is no more valuable commodity than mass. They even have a saying, every ounce matters.
When Apollo 11 returns to Earth, they come back with 50 pounds of moon rocks that they didn't leave Cape Canaveral with. So they had to leave an equivalent weight of items behind to compensate for the rocks.
But Armstrong didn't want to leave the prize camera on the moon.
It seems that Armstrong makes an executive decision to take the 16 millimeter film camera back. And he keeps this secret. He doesn't tell NASA, he doesn't even tell his wife for decades.
And now Armstrong's secret camera could turn out to be worth a fortune.
Buzz Aldrin's Apollo 11 jacket sells for $2.8 million in 2022. And bags used to collect rock samples sell for $2 million at auction. And they don't even have moon rock in them anymore. So can you imagine what this camera would sell for?
Carol Knight, however, does not cash in. Instead, she donates the camera to the Space Museum for public display. You can still go see it today, and it helps to ensure that Armstrong's legacy will carry on.
Exploring the ocean can reveal strange things. In 2022, divers uncovered a tragic piece of space history.
It's 2022, and underwater explorer Mike Barnett and wreck specialist Jimmy Godomsky are diving off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They're part of a documentary crew searching for a downed rescue plane that went missing in the 1940s.
The particular aircraft that they're looking for is a PBM Mariner flying boat. It's got a large superstructure, and it'll be easily recognizable because of its top-mounted inverted gull wings.
On the ocean floor, Mike spots a shape that's buried under coral sand, and his gut is leading him to believe that it's part of a wing of that PBM Mariner plane, so he decides to check it out.
They use blowers to delicately remove sand and coral fragments from the object. But as the sand blows off, they see something that doesn't make sense.
They uncover what appears to be a series of white bricks or cobblestones mounted to the object.
Now, even though it appears to have been buried for a long time, these bricks are still very white with no signs of any rust or oxidation. They seem to be made of a composite that neither of them recognize.
Mike realizes this isn't a World War II plane, but the location of the wreck gives him another idea.
They're just offshore from Cape Canaveral, which launches rockets all the time. And parts of rockets, like boosters, are designed to fall back into the ocean from 50 miles up, but this thing is flat and wide, and so it can't be a rocket booster.
As he heads back to shore, Mike calls a former astronaut friend named Bruce Melnick to look at the video. It takes Melnick all of 2 seconds to recognize those white bricks.
These are heat tiles of the type that were used on the space shuttle to protect it from heat during re-entry.
Then Melnick says something that stops everyone in their tracks.
Melnick is sure that if there's a big piece of a space shuttle just off the coast of Florida, it belonged to Challenger.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
When Space Shuttle Challenger detonates in the skies above Cape Canaveral in January 1986, it sends the entire country into mourning. It kills all 7 crew members, including schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe, who was supposed to be the first civilian in space.
Obviously, there's a scramble to see what caused this horrific tragedy, so the Navy undertakes the biggest salvage operation in history. But it's an incredibly difficult mission because debris is spread across 500 square miles of ocean.
They collect over 100 tons of wreckage. And that wreckage, combined with film footage, reveals that the fault is an O-ring, a little rubber gasket in a rocket booster that was responsible for triggering the explosion.
Mike brings footage from his dive to NASA program director Mike Chinelli, hoping to confirm that what they found truly is a piece of the Challenger shuttle.
And I'm always a little cautious because, as you know, we've launched rockets for over 70 years, so there's a lot of objects out there. But after looking at the object in greater detail, you've discovered Challenger. I certainly can't thank you enough for showing me this. It's powerful.
Everyone who was alive and conscious at the time remembers where they were when it happened. Seeing this artifact is enough to bring you right back to that moment in history.